Oh, wait, we got no audio? Well, the good news is you didn't miss anything there. He just basically introduced them. So let's try this again.
Of what is the most significant intellectual shift in recorded human history. A radical transformation of consciousness. Humanity is synchronizing to Bitcoin. So there are a lot of different ways that we transfer information and ways that we don't fully understand. There was a 30-year study conducted on the Japanese island of Kushima that observed monkeys teaching each other how to wash sweet potatoes. And what scientists found during that study was, after a threshold number of monkeys acquired this skill, monkeys on other parts of the island that had no exposure to the training started to exhibit the behavior. Collective consciousness. So this became what was called the 99 monkeys theory, or the 100 monkeys theory. The idea that information can be transmitted collectively. And the experts went on to sort of question or debunk this study. But I've observed it in my own real life personally. Last fall, I was attending a Tibetan throat singing workshop. And Tibetan throat singing is not kind of a skill that people can just do by accident. But what is interesting about it is, of a certain number of people who are just around or in the presence of someone else who knows how to do it, they will go to bed and wake up the next day with the ability. And in the workshop that I was in, it actually happened to someone. So we witnessed a sort of information download, and it was so cool. And it got me thinking about this idea of, what does it mean to be transferring information and ideas? And we do this all the time already using money. Money is a sense-making apparatus. It is a tool that we use every day to make sense of the world around us. We use money as a system to collect and gather information and make comparisons and assessments about things that we're doing with our energy and our time. And the problem with the way we use money is that there are 167 different ways in the world today that people are gathering information and making sense of the world around them. So someone who comes from Central America would have maybe very little concept of saving, and someone from Malaysia wouldn't really be experienced in thinking about using credit and debt. It's just something they don't have. And for those people, it would probably be very difficult for them to understand why we would willingly become debt slaves trying to acquire a house, or maybe even more than one, so that we can all feel like we're getting rich. You can imagine that 167 different regional ways of making sense of the world would make it incredibly difficult for us, sort of at a species level, to have a uniform sense of reality and a consistent set of priorities and goals. So the regionality of money is something that is just absurd in today's day and age. If you think about, not only does our money not work somewhere else, we can't spend loonies in Mexico, but we also understand and think about money very differently depending on where we're from. It's because the rules of the money systems we're using themselves are opaque, they're not transparent, they change all the time. The information that we're collecting using money is like trying to make a judgment on how to build a building with a ruler that you eyeball the measurements on the ruler yourself. It doesn't make sense. And on some level, I think we all are aware that the apparatus we've been given, we've been adopted into this money system, has a flaw in the logic. And I think as well that in some way, in agreeing to participate in such a system is basically akin to letting someone else make sense of the world for you. And so the act of doing that is basically giving up on the right you might have to audit the sensibility or the rationality of the world that we live in. We're sort of told the rules of the game, and we really just kind of go out and do the best we can with them. And one of the most nonsensical aspects of the way our money works is that our money has no relationship to time. We have a relationship to time when we earn money. We spend our finite time to earn the money that we acquire. Our time is finite. And our time becomes increasingly finite as our life progresses. The older we get, the less time we have. Weirdly, our money during that same time becomes less valuable. So not only does our money become less valuable over time, but in doing that, it's eroding the value of the time that you've spent and the time that you have left. Fiat money compresses time as it loses value, and there's no floor to how small it can compress your time to. And I think we can observe the effects of this in our day-to-day lives when we think about TV shows used to be 22 minutes, and then we drop them down to the length of an Instagram reel. And now people are watching TikTok, and if you don't capture someone's attention within the first 7 seconds of a reel, they're swiping to the next thing. It's because we're feeling the crunch of time. And part of it has to do with this feeling that time is flying. Even our traditional financial system has a term for this. It's the time value of money. And in the time value of money, the fiat way of thinking about this is that $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. because you would have the opportunity to grow that money. But what we're really saying with time value of money is we need it now because we need to do something with it. I could have picked any number of images for this, but I think what happens as a result of participating in a system that doesn't make any sense is that we forfeit our ability to audit the sensibility of the society that we live in. And we look at any number of things that just don't make sense, and the way our world works is we don't have a way to really make a difference or a change about it. The output of a system that runs on nonsense would be a world that doesn't make any sense. We don't have a clear set of rules. We don't have clean and uniform information. And I want to suggest that for people who are responsible for making the rules, it would be to their advantage, or if you were making the rules, it would be to your advantage to have a dependency on externally imposed rules to allow people to help them make sense of a nonsensical world. So what is Bitcoin doing? Bitcoin is much, much more than a monetary revolution. It's a paradigm for us to think about coming to an agreement in an entirely new way, in a way that is consensual, in a way that is based on rules, transparency, auditability. We're learning how to communicate with each other in a voluntary way that makes sense. It's the basis for a new paradigm for making sense of things. And I think that if we think about this idea that money is a sense-making apparatus, it's a tool that we use to make sense of the world, it makes sense that money should have a relationship to reality. The combination of time and energy is what creates a product or a service. It's how we earn money. And so to me, I like to think about money as being a representation of sort of the relationship between these three things, time, energy, and money. And I use my grade 3 math, Pythagoras theorem. It's like the triangle where if you know any length, or if you know the dimensions of two of the sides, you should be able to figure anything out about the third. So if you know how much time it took to do something, and you know how much energy it required to do it, then you should be able to make an estimate about what that thing is worth. And if you know how much energy something took, and you know that its value, then you should be able to work backwards and think about how long it took to do it. It makes sense that money should have a relationship between these three things. And Bitcoin obviously has strong intrinsic relationships to both energy and time. Energy is an obvious one. There's a provable amount of energy involved in mining every block that is added to the Bitcoin blockchain. And we can measure it, and we can see it externally. Energy is the input, money is the output. Time. Bitcoin is a clock. It's a clock that is accurate to the block. We think about Bitcoin being a medium of exchange. When is it going to be a medium of exchange? And when I was thinking about this concept of Bitcoin being a clock, people are already using Bitcoin as their unit of time. And you see people talk about the block height of a significant life event. You know, the birth of a child, a wedding, happened at this block height. What does a clock do? It's something that measures a linear progression of intervals of something. That's Bitcoin. And the Bitcoin clock is incredibly accurate. We know exactly when the next halving is going to happen. It will happen precisely at the 1,050,000th block height. So if you think about the act of synchronizing yourself to a clock, it's a different clock. It's a clock where the smallest measurement is around 10 minutes. So if we think about that fiat concept of the compression of our time, what Bitcoin's doing is putting a floor on the urgency or the immediacy of how fast your time can be compressed. And when we're thinking about syncing ourselves to Bitcoin's clock, I think it happens in two ways. One is the literal way of paying attention to the time measurements of Bitcoin. But the second way we synchronize to Bitcoin's clock is by doing stuff like this, by consuming each other's ideas. And the act of sharing that information is synchronizing all of us. It's changing our way of thinking and replacing that old way of thinking about things with new ways. And this is something that has changed my life personally in ways I can't even begin to explain. Your spending habits, how you choose to spend your free time, the trips you might take or not take, the people you choose to hang out with. Bitcoin, synchronizing yourself to Bitcoin's clock starts to change your entire life. It lowers your time preference. And this is already happening right now. So the difference is 99 monkeys versus 8 billion people, right? We are coming online, one person at a time, like blinking lights. And it's a process that's going to take a while. But one by one, as a result of stuff like this, we are all starting to synchronize how we think about time, energy, and money. And I like to think about it like it's a software upgrade. The act of synchronizing yourself to Bitcoin is like replacing an old software and upgrading it with a new one. We think about 167 local and regional ways of making sense of the world being reduced down to one uniform way of thinking. The fiat software model runs on the principles that make the fiat world make sense. This is the world that we were adopted into when we were all born. Fiat money runs on greed, theft, and violence.
Okay, quickly here. Hope you can hear me. Anyways, quickly here, we got a question from Kevin in the chat. Why is Bitcoin adoption so slow? I'm with Larry Lepard. Why does something so obvious take so long to take root? So he just kind of covered that. You got the 99 monkeys versus 8 billion people, 8 billion people. And the next part he's about to talk about here is in terms, it's going to tie perfectly into this question here in terms of why is it taking so long for adoption to come into play here. And so I'll let you listen here, but pay attention in terms of why Bitcoin adoption is taking so long from our point of view, from our individual standpoint. Why is it taking so long? But keep in mind here that we're 15 years into this thing, 15 years. So I'll let the show keep going here, but I just want to quickly stop and point your attention to this comment here. Why is it taking so long and what this guy's about to say? And consider, we got 8 billion people here.
And all we can do as participants in that system is do our best with the information that we can collect using it. So when we swap out the software and start synchronizing to Bitcoin what we're actually doing, we can't help but as a result of consuming these ideas and information, but exhibit the thoughts and behaviors that go along with it. Consensual, voluntary interaction based on rules and rationality. And this is why I think what Bitcoin is really doing is moving us towards a golden age of reason, a society where everyone has a uniform access to information and a baseline expectation that things are fair. If anyone, I'm sure people in here will have played the Civilization video games at some point. And in the Civilization video games, how it works is you move through the different technological discoveries, and those discoveries unlock future discoveries to enable you to do different eras of development. And I imagine Bitcoin as this sort of thing where if we were thinking about what you would have to unlock, you would unlock Bitcoin to unlock other things that aren't possible now, things that we haven't even thought of yet. Things like, in the short term, an obvious one would be the end of fiat. We can't unlock the end of fiat until we've unlocked Bitcoin. And we haven't unlocked it yet. It exists. But zooming further out, what will it mean for humanity when we've had a reasonable length of time to think in a uniform way, to think in a species level way about priorities and goals? What will those technologies look like? They will be species level ideas that aren't possible now. The Kardashev scale is an idea that was proposed in the 60s by a Soviet physicist to measure what a theoretical extraterrestrial civilizations might be like. And it's a measurement of a civilization's ability to harness energy. And level 1 of the Kardashev scale, so we're not even a level 1. Level 1 of the Kardashev scale is a civilization that has harnessed all of the energy available to them on their own planet. And Bitcoin is a technology that can at least put us on the path to thinking about it, to imagining the possibility of quantifying and commodifying all of the energy available to us on Earth. And this is because Bitcoin is our first way to monetize all of the stranded energy out there. The problem why we're not able to leverage that right now is that we still live in a world with 167 local monies trying to make sense of what Bitcoin even is. So if we think about the time scale of a collective consciousness, I think of a way to think about it might be to consider what the lifespan of that consciousness might be like. So a human life might be 100 years. So as humans, we measure significant life events, maybe in years and decades. And the next level up of a collective consciousness might be a community or even a nation state. And a nation state would probably measure significant events in decades and centuries. And the next level up from nation states, we'll say, is civilization or species level consciousness. And at the humanity level, we're probably measuring things in centuries and millennia. So how are we doing with Bitcoin? I'd say pretty good. If we think about how old Bitcoin is in terms of humanity as a civilization, we're talking about we've been using money. We've been collectively sense-making money for thousands of years. And in 15 years, we've already managed to do this. Pretty good. And so if this thing takes 50 years or 100, we're moving towards that 99 monkeys moment. There will be a moment in time where enough of us have understood this idea. Anyone can understand Bitcoin with enough time and effort. And so when that moment arrives, and I hope we're alive to see it, but if we're not, just by replacing your own software, we are moving towards imparting a gift on humanity that will be given to every single person that is born from here until infinity. So we're doing a lot more than changing the money. We're changing the way humans think about how to interact, how to be civil, how to think about an expectation of rationality. And then if you imagine what that might mean, what will the world look like if we took all of the broken money problems out and replaced it with an entirely different way of thinking about everything? That's what we're doing. So congratulations on your front row seat for the most significant intellectual shift that's happened in recorded history. And it's my pleasure here to be here with you. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for sticking around through that. That was a longer video, probably the longest video we've ever done on live show. We do a lot of those on the Living in the Future, longer videos, but anyways, incredibly useful talk. I think just really taking things into perspective. And I love how he ended that in terms of, we have a front row seat here in such a dramatic change to the world. It's not just the money, but it's how everybody sees the world and how we're all agreeing on this one set of rules as opposed to 167 of them. It's so significant that I think he even undersold it there. And I probably undersell it all the time, but this is it's so crazy what we're moving into here. And I just wanted to share that with you today. So I got a couple of comments on that. I've listened to that 2 or 3 times now. Hence how I knew what was coming there to answer Kev's question. But I got a couple of different comments on it. So he said that the 167 currencies, that's what we got going right now. That's our current financial system, 167 different currencies. And he said that you can't take a loonie and try to spend it in Mexico. But even crazier than that is you can't take a loonie and spend it in the US, our neighboring country. So if you lived in the very southern part of Canada and you want to take a walk, maybe a kilometer or 2 into the US, your money, your entire financial system, everything that you've ever known in terms of your dollar, it would not be accepted in the US, a kilometer away, just because there's a border there that separates the 2 different currencies. That's insane, right? When you actually stop and think about it, I know we've kind of been raised into this system and like a fish in water, but when you actually stop and think about how insane that is, and no wonder nothing really makes sense in this world right now, is because we're living through that kind of bullshit. So that's the first one. But the other one is the time aspect of it. And I've been thinking about this quite a bit in the last couple of years, is why, when you get older, why does time move faster? Because you always hear it. And I'm sure you've noticed this. Uh-oh. Did we lose zap.stream? Looks like we're still going. Oh, I need to top it up though. Okay, I got you. Let's top it up. Let's feed the zap.stream. Oh yeah, how do I do that again? Top up. Okay. We paid our dues over on zap.stream. There it is. Okay, so what I was talking about there is why, and I'm sure you can relate to this, but when you're like 15, 16, 17, probably all the way up to you're 25 years old, like time moves pretty slow, right? And then once you get past that hump of like 25, 30, 35, 40, and beyond, it just seems like time is it's like this ticker, like the measurement of it is just flying by. It's like almost like the ticker's broken, time's going so fast. And I've been trying to think of why that is. And I think that after listening to that and after really thinking about our fiat world, it makes sense. Because when you're that age, your priorities in life aren't money. They're learning, I guess, in the broken system that we grow up in. It's having fun, it's hanging out, it's meeting girls or guys, it's having beers. That's your priorities. And then all of a sudden you shift into this world where you're on your own and you have to put food on your table and you have to pay the rent, pay your mortgage, whatever you need to do, you have to do that now. And so you're basically thrown into this system of fiat where you're losing time faster. You have to work harder for less. And so that makes a lot of sense to me. Not only are you getting older and your time's, getting shorter, but we're further into this path of fiat. And the further we get into this path of fiat, the faster the time preference is, the harder you have to work for less of it. And so not only are you losing time in your life, but you're also losing time because of money. And as we move forward here, especially in these last 4 years, that time is accelerating faster than we can even imagine. And so if you're not somebody who's worried about that system yet, if you're like 16, 15 years old, you don't have to worry about that. You're not attached to that fiat time preference yet. But as you get older and older and older, and the fiat system continues to deteriorate even further and further and further, time's just like this. And so if you think about how busy everybody is in the world right now, like we literally set up meetings in seconds and minutes. That's how the fiat world works. And I was thinking, what would a world look like if we were actually setting our calendars and setting our appointments and meeting times based on the block height? Because as he said there, there's a difference between a second, that's the floor for how we measure time right now, versus every 10 minutes, which is the block height. So if you just said, like, I'll meet you at block height 844440, there'd be some calculation there. I'm sure humans would have to really, we'd have to have some sort of app on our phone to tell what time this block height is. But wouldn't it make sense, instead of setting our clocks and our appointments to be to the minute instead of just to the block height? Why do we have to be so hypersensitive around time? And it's because of our money. That's why. It's because of our money. So that's why is time going so fast as you get older? It's the fiat mind. You switch to a fiat mindset. You're chasing money. That's all you're focused on, and that's it's deteriorating faster. So your life's going faster. And the other one here is, there's two more things that I want to talk about here. The other one is stranded energy, and he said that in terms of the scale that humanity is measured on, is the ability to convert energy on its planet. And we haven't got to that point yet. But with Bitcoin, we actually can. And we talk about this all the time on the show here, how different countries who never had the ability to monetize their natural resources now have the ability to do that. So we're moving towards this Kardashev scale where we're actually going to be able to utilize all of the energy that we have on this planet. Then we can go from there. We're probably not going to be around for that, but who knows? So if you think about a country like El Salvador, they actually mined, I don't know what the time frame on this is. I think it's a couple months, but they actually mined 500 Bitcoin using a volcano. 500 Bitcoin using a volcano. And if you think about that, why does that work now? Because of Bitcoin. Because before, if they actually wanted to convert that energy from their natural resources, from their volcano, if they wanted to turn that into money, they would have to harness it, and then they would have to sell it to other countries. If they had more supply than demand, they could sell that excess energy to other countries. But that electricity has to travel, and electricity only travels so far. So if you actually hook up, which they have done, if you hook up a Bitcoin miner to that volcano and harness that energy, and instead of having to sell it to other countries, you can convert it directly into money. That changes everything. And so he said there, energy input equals money output. So think about the trickle-down effect of El Salvador and how this is going to affect them in the coming years, and how it's going to change their citizens' lives. Because they went from being a very poor country with a bunch of violence and crime they're moving into a very abundant country. And if you think about if their volcanoes are able to harness that energy, convert it into money, and pay for their infrastructure, they're using natural resources instead of human resources. So in Canada here, in the US, we're basically using our human resources, our labor. We're going to work every day. Government takes that from us, and that's how they fund infrastructure and, of course, Ukraine. But in a world where we don't have to rely on natural resources or on human resources, we can rely on our natural resources, convert that directly into money. Think about the implications that's going to have on nations and citizens within those nations. Think about the taxes. El Salvador is moving towards a world where their citizens don't have to pay any income taxes because their natural resources, like volcanoes, are the ones funding their infrastructure. So that's what we're moving into. And then the last one here is he said that we're living in a world that doesn't make sense. That's the input. And so we've seen this, and it's accelerating now, but we're living in a clown world right now, fiat world. And the reason for that is because we can't accurately measure anything, because everything that we measure, our time, our energy, the products, services, everything is measured in this currency, which is a complete illusion. Complete illusion. And the reason for that is because we don't know how much exists. We have no idea how many US dollars are out there in circulation right now. We have an estimate, a guess of how many US dollars are out there, but we don't have the exact amount. And so when you don't have that fixed peg like Bitcoin provides, when you don't have that fixed peg to value everything on, everything's a shit show. We're just doing our best here to try to value everything in one country's currency out of 167. We're comparing everything in the world against one country's currency, where we have no idea how many of them exist. We don't know how many have been stolen, lost, burned, flooded, washed away, under mattresses, buried in grounds. We have no idea how many exist. And so when you're trying to value everything and set rules based on that system that has he said it was a broken ruler, essentially, trying to build a house with a broken ruler. That's what we're doing here in fiat, is we're setting up our whole society around a currency and a system that's completely broken. So as more and more people turn on and learn Bitcoin and shows like this, people show up, that's how things change. So very good presentation there. Shout out to the Canadian Bitcoin Conference for having that presentation. That fella, I forget his name. I deleted it already, but you can go back and see if you want to. But that's what I got for you today. I have some actionable things here, as we do every show. It's important to have some actionable items instead of just listening to it and bitching about it, complaining. A few actionable things here of how to speed this up. As Kev said, why is Bitcoin adoption so slow? How does something so obvious take so long to take root? So a couple things that I would say here in terms of actionable items is, number one, find yourself a network. The more you can spend with other Bitcoiners talking about Bitcoin, living in this Bitcoin world, the better off that you're going to be. So find some sort of community, some sort of network where you can have discussions, share ideas, and really grow together and push this whole thing forward faster. Second one is teach your kids about it. There's a lot of people out there in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s who will probably never come around to the idea of Bitcoin, ever. They've just spent too many years in the fiat world. They'll never get to the point where they understand Bitcoin, and they don't really care, honestly. But the one thing that we can do is start teaching our kids about this. Because the kids go to school, they go into the public school system, they get fed all this bullshit in terms of history. They don't get taught about money, none of that. So it's very important to teach your kids at a young age of this new system called Bitcoin, because then they're going to tell their friends about it, and this adoption, the lights turning on around the world, is going to accelerate. And so one thing I would say on that is check out this podcast called Wildlife. And it's a podcast about homeschooling. And I just saw that she released a new episode about history. And let me quickly find it here. Where was it? So it's called History in School versus History in Real Life, with ancient history researcher Derek Olson. So honestly, the thing that got me into Bitcoin was history. I listened to a fellow named Bitcoin Ben talk about the history of money and how everything's evolved in the last 1,000 and 100 years to where we got to now. And so history is very important in this whole process here. So check out the podcast, start listening to things like that, where you can actually get ideas and resources on how to teach your kids about money and specifically Bitcoin. The next one here is just spend more time in the system every single day. Unplug from that old system more and more. A couple minutes, a couple hours. Eventually, you're going to be spending your whole day in Bitcoin, not just learning about it, watching videos, listening to podcasts, but actually you're going to be earning Bitcoin, providing value, doing services, creating products, and charging people in Bitcoin for that. I saw a tweet today, or I think it was a post on nostr, but it said, become so good at something that people are going to be forced to pay you in Bitcoin. Add so much value that it doesn't matter. You're essentially, because we're in a spot right now where if you're charging people in Bitcoin, they're probably just going to find somebody else to do it for you instead, to do it for them. But if you can become so good at your craft and whatever it is that you're offering to the world, that people have no choice but to pay you in Bitcoin, they want to hire you and you want Bitcoin, that's the end goal with this whole thing. So spend more time in this system. And one idea that I would share with you today is that we're going to be doing this challenge. The challenge is called 100 sats for 100 days for 100K. So we got a group chat going. There's a lot of really good resources in there already. And I think that even if you don't get to the end of this challenge, even if you don't complete it after 100 days, you're going to have so many good resources and create so many good habits in terms of earning Bitcoin every single day that it'll be beyond valuable for you. So if you are interested in joining the challenge, it starts today. We're going to go for 100 days. It ends on August 28th, 2024. So from May 21st to August 28th, 2024, we're going to be doing this 100-day challenge, 100 sats per day for 100 days for 100K. And one person at the end of it is going to end up with 100,000 sats. If anybody completes the challenge, they're going to be entered into a draw from me for 100,000 sats. So that's something I wanted to do just to get people creating new habits, getting into a habit of earning Bitcoin every single day. And that's kind of my way of giving back to the Living in the Future community. So one person is going to get 100,000 sats. And just kind of going back to what we talked about earlier in terms of how scarce things are right now. So it says that about 5 sats are being mined per human per day. So if you're getting into a habit of earning 100 sats per day, think about how far ahead you're going to be in terms of this new system. So at the end of it, you're going to have about, if you complete it, if you only get 100 sats per day, you're going to end up with 100 or 10,000 sats. But that's not the idea here. The point is new habits, new ways to earn income, sharing ideas, sharing resources, being part of a community there. And so you're going to be part of the challenge and you're going to be part of the group chat there. So if you're interested, shoot me an email, 88sats@proton.me will get you in the challenge. Or you can just sign up. Description below, it says Living in the Future. Click that, join it, and we'll send you all the information that you need. So that challenge starts today, spending more time in the system, earning Bitcoin. And the last one here that I would say is if you consider all this, everything we talked about today in terms of the scarcity, in terms of how valuable Bitcoin is, in terms of this new system we're moving into, the most important thing that you can be doing right now is having a plan. Having a plan in place in terms of how you're going to earn Bitcoin, how you're going to spend your Bitcoin, and most importantly, how you're going to pass that Bitcoin on to your family. Because we think in years, humans think in years and decades, societies, towns, states think in decades and centuries, and civilization itself thinks in centuries and millennia. So think about how long this is going to go on for. We're 15 years into this right now. The main thing that you need to be doing right now is figuring out how to earn Bitcoin and how to protect that Bitcoin and pass it on to your future generations. Don't fuck this up. And I know that there's a lot of people out there watching right now who, if something were to happen, there could be a million different scenarios. They could fuck this up. If they got hit by a bus today, would their family be able to figure out how to restore that Bitcoin? So make sure that you have a plan in place. This stuff is so important. You have to get it right. So if you have any questions, anything you want to ask me about an inheritance, I'm working on something right now I think is going to be very valuable for the listeners of the show and the people within this community in terms of an inheritance plan but I'm not quite there yet. I'm going to be talking about it probably in the next couple weeks. But I just think that this is the part of Bitcoin that so many people are underestimating. They're so focused on getting as much as they can, but they don't have a real solid plan in place of how to protect it and how to pass it on to their kids. So that's what I would say. And if you want to be, like I said, if you want to get in touch with me, I'm going to have some stuff coming about that in the next couple weeks. So there you go. I'm not even going to try to pronounce this name. It looks like a little kitten, though. It's my first stream I've watched of you. I love it. Just subscribe. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.